Hi, my name's Johnny McCormack. I'm a photographer and designer based in Tamaki, Makaurau, Aotearoa, New Zealand. We're here in Allpress Studio Gallery where my work Temporal is on display. Temporal, it's a landscape in flux. It's this constant evolving landscape where we've got this climatic weathering, but we've also got sort of tectonic fault lines and uplift earth plates meeting each other and pushing up, forming the Southern Alps, and then we've got this another layer of weather coming through and changing the landscape from retreating glaciers to ice receding, and it sort of scars the landscape, and it can leave behind these moraine walls like giant trenches in the landscape. And that was something I sort of first noticed and drew me into the landscape, into these sort of tight areas to photograph. And there's a weird sort of sense of scale because it's hard to imagine when you crop in just how big a human would be in that landscape, because it's just so sort of big in that area. And I guess I got some shots a few years back that sort of got me thinking about the work and how to capture this environment where you've got this sort of deep time in the landscape. You've got the evolving landscape on sort of two levels, the formation of these mountains that happened over a very long period of time, and then a more sped up period of climatic weathering happening in a lot of sort of detail, like a lot of rock and interesting elements in there to photograph, like even sort of fossils and other deposits coming through to the surface that further adds to the story. Yeah, when it came time to sort of formalize this body of work and push it forward a bit, I sort of doubled back and started looking at documentary photography and how its roots were like in, for want of a better term, like postcard photography. They were about advertising a place, a location for, often for like in a place being colonized at the time. It was about getting people to go there, to travel, to bear witness to these locations. And I didn't want that at all about the work. I wanted the work to be more about the time, deep time, and how the landscape is changing and evolving and constantly in flux. And sort of way I figured I could do that was not give a sky, no horizon line. So you're drawn into the work more, you're sort of pulled in to examine, and it becomes a bit more abstract in terms of the landscape and understanding where you are or where this location is. One of the techniques I used to achieve this sort of these details was to find landscapes that were really large, and because if you sort of zoom in onto something that's quite small, it's quite obvious that you've kind of cropped in on it. So some of these landscapes are actually pulled right back and shot from a long way away on a large telephoto lens, and it compresses the landscape, and it pulls the foreground and the background together, almost pancake flattening the two, and then shooting them for like maximum depth of field for a long period of time to get both of them sharp, and almost becomes like an illusion. I think you can sort of see that in Serac. A friend saw that work and said, it's like it's moving, and it was sort of the nicest compliment, because that landscape is moving. It's sure it's been frozen in time, but it's very much, you can see like the rock coming out of the ice as that glacier retreats. Yeah, I became familiar with this environment, like the glaciers and the mountains, through traveling and spending time shooting, photographing, snowboarding. I did that for a number of years, back-to-back winters, traveling around, spending a lot of time in the South Island, and being up in the snow, in the alpine, staying in huts. For me, one of the most memorable experiences was staying in Tasman Hut in Aoraki, Mount Cook. We're there for a few nights, and you get sort of taken in there, and you're walking in this environment. You're got harnesses on, and you're roped together, and things are creaking and groaning around you, and you feel really vulnerable. You could fall down a crevasse at any moment. And we trekked up to the hut, and we were staying there. And I just remember at one night there was this, it was just so silent and so cold and peaceful. And then there was this hugest thundering rumble, and like just tons and tons of frozen water, just chunks of ice just flying off this huge rock cliff face. It's not even a cliff, it's just the whole mountain and landing in the valley below, and the noise it made. And it's just the scale in that area is just, it's hard to explain till you're there. And so with Temporal, I was drawn to that environment, and I wanted to kind of crop in, like photograph a scene within a scene, like a detail, but this detail would actually be huge in scale itself. And just to like draw your eye in and examine what's in there and sort of pull it apart. And there can be, you know, I mentioned earlier, there can be fossils and all sorts of traces of time embedded in this landscape. Temporal, the photo book, it's been a few years in the making. It started during the first COVID lockdown. I was really looking to do a self-published book, and so I first sort of started looking at like different formats and sizes. I wanted to print as the sort of biggest landscape format that I could, so I did a bit of research on digital printers and what was available, and then it was sort of tricky sourcing paper. There wasn't much paper coming into the country, so it was a bit of a journey. But yeah, I wanted to create like a nice, easy to flick through open format, so I went with pamphlet stitching. So I bound the book myself. And with the cover, I wanted something that was quite tactile, so I looked at like using coloured paper, which was again sort of harder to get like the exact GSM and all those sort of little details I wanted. But then with the image, this is a silk screen print, and it's done in reverse, so it's a negative, and it's a light colour printed on dark paper. And yeah, screen printed inside as well for the text. And then the inside is HP Indigo printed colour plates, and there's 18 images. So there was the opportunity to have a few extra images that aren't in the exhibition. The book also features like a tipped in insert where I've used some historical imagery. This is an early shot at Franz Josef Glacier, sort of circa 1930s. Found this in a little postcard collected at an antique shop on the west coast. And then at the back I've got a historical image from the National Library of a party hiking in Franz Josef Glacier, so circa 1930s. And also in here is from GNS Science's fault lines throughout New Zealand, both active and inactive. And it sort of basically makes a map of the whole country, like the sort of fault lines everywhere. Yeah, a big part of producing a photo book, I feel, is like one of the hardest things is sequencing your images. And fortunately for me, I was lucky my partner, Megan Ellis, who's a photographer as well, was able to help me sort of edit down the images. And as you edit, like you gain a clarity of the storytelling. And it can be sort of one of the hardest things to do is, you know, sometimes you have to kill your darlings and let go of the images that you might have a personal relationship with that you like because of a memory or a location. And so yeah, lucky for me, my partner Megan helped me sort of cull those ones and sequence the book. And it's, yeah, I feel like there's a real knack to nailing that sequence, and not saying I nailed it, but just in terms of the distilling, the editing down, the removal of images to help that story, that body of work really come to life, form what it is.